The morning mist clung to the Smoky Mountains like a secret, curling low over pine tops and settling deep in the hollers. A stillness lay heavy in the air, the kind that only comes before a storm. One that didn't rattle with thunder, but with the sound of boots, radios, and distant engines. For Mark and Digger, the final batch of the season was supposed to be their crowning moment. Months of dodging bears, backstabbing rivals, and the relentless eye of the law had led to this. A secret run of peach brandy, so smooth it made a preacher swear. They had the recipe right, the still humming hot, and customers lined up quiet and loyal. It was their best work yet. But nothing gold stays, especially in the outlaw world of moonshining. Something ain't right. Mark flipped off the burner, steam hissing as it escaped the copper worm coil. Digger, wiping sweat from his brow with a rag that once might have been a clean t-shirt, gave him a sideways glance. "You hear that?" Diva asked. Mark paused, listening. "Nothing. That's the problem," Diva said, stepping back from the still. "Should be birds. Bugs. Somethin'." Mark nodded. Instinct ran deeper than moonshine in these hills, and something in the air had gone cold. "Time to shut her down," Mark said. Fast. They moved like men who'd been through this before, because they had. The still was disassembled in minutes, key parts loaded into the back of the gator, the mash dumped in a hurry into the woods. No time to clean. No time to hide it perfect. Over the ridge, the whine of an ATV echoed. Too close. They sting down the mountain. In a makeshift command center rigged out of a Forest Service trailer, Deputy Wilkins and his task force were locking in coordinates. "Thermal says movement about a quarter-mile north. That's where they're cookin'. Let's move." Flashlights flicked on. Radios squawked. The law had eyes in the woods, and this time, they wanted Mark and Digger caught red-handed. "We get 'em this time, boys," Wilkins said, grinning like he already tasted the bust. A rabbit's heart, a fox's mind. Mark and Digger didn't run fast, but they ran smart. As Digger drove the gator down an overgrown trail no one but them knew, Mark tossed moonshine jugs covered in burlap into a hidden culvert behind a stack of deadfall he'd rigged weeks ago for just this kind of emergency. "We don't need the shine," Mark said. "We need freedom." Diva nodded. "Shine you can make again. Jail's harder to walk away from." The gator veered off the trail and disappeared behind an old cabin. The building looked like it'd collapse if you looked at it wrong. But it was the entrance to one of the oldest tricks in their book. A fake front hiding a tunnel that ran clear under the ridge and popped out by the river. They jumped off, ditched the keys, and slipped into the shadows. Behind them, the dogs were starting to bark. In the belly of the beast Wilkins and his team arrived at the still site moments later. Smoke still hung in the air. A few mason jar shards glinted on the ground. But Mark and Digger were gone. "Son of a..." Wilkins kicked a tree root. "They were just here, still warm," another officer said, touching the copper pot. "They bolted maybe 5-10 minutes ago." Wilkins didn't curse again. He didn't have to. The look on his face said it all. This was personal now. A message in the mash the next day. Mark and Digger emerged near the Pigeon River, clothes dirty, tired as hell, but free. Digger reached into his coat and pulled out a single mason jar, untouched, sealed tight. "Just one," he said. "Had to keep something for the road." Mark laughed. "Can't blame you." They sat on a rock, passing the jar back and forth, watching the sun rise. Then Mark pulled something else from his bag. A laminated photo of their still, staged with a cardboard cutout of Bigfoot beside it and a sign that read, "You just got outfoxed." They mailed it to Deputy Wilkins. Back in the holler 2 weeks later, the heat had died down. The feds moved on to bigger fish, and Wilkins was left with nothing but frustration and a blurry trail cam shot of Mark flipping him the bird as he walked into the woods. Mark and Digger, meanwhile, were rebuilding. Not the same still. No, that was retired now. They were moving deeper into the mountains, where the trails were steeper and the air thinner. They took their time too. They had no rush. Reputation was like sour mash. It only got stronger when you let it sit. The legend grows. News of their escape spread like wildfire. Other shiners whispered their names with a little more respect. Some even started calling them the mountain ghosts. They'd vanished right under the law's nose again. And the peach brandy? Oh, it became legendary. The few who got bottles paid handsomely, and those who drank it claimed it tasted like summer memories and lightning strikes. Mark and Digger didn't talk much about that day. They didn't need to. Because in the hollers, stories tell themselves. Don't need to brag. And epilogue. A toast to the outlaws. The final ended with a slow pan over the misty mountains. A crackling voiceover from Digger played. We ain't in this game for fame or fortune. We do it 'cause it's in our blood. The law can chase us all they want, but they ain't never gonna catch the spirit of the mountain. That's ours to keep. Then, in the final shot, Mark raises a jar by a campfire, looks straight at the camera, and says, "To the ones who never got caught." Fade to black. End of season 14. If you'd like a version with dialogue script style, or want a sneak peek of season 15's potential setup, just holler. Absolutely. Here's a creative 1,500-word story for the Moonshiners season 14 final, centered on Mark and Digger narrowly evading arrest as the law tightens its grip. This fictional episode blends suspense, Appalachian grit, moonshine mastery, and the outlaw spirit fans love. Moonshiners, season 14 final. Smoke in the hull of the sun hadn't yet peeked over the Blue Ridge Mountains when Mark Rogers wiped his hands on an old rag and nodded across the still sight. Digger Mains, leaning against a stack of mash barrels, gave him a half smile. Last run of the season, partner, Mark said, his voice low and calm. Yeah, Digger muttered, chewing on a toothpick. And maybe our last run, period. The tension in his voice wasn't just paranoia. Word had been trickling in from up and down the back roads. The law was on the move. Not just the county boys either. This time, it was the feds. Someone had snitched. A warning on the wind 2 days earlier. A man known only as Tater had stopped by their supply drop in the woods, out of breath, wide-eyed, and visibly rattled. They're comin'? Tater whispered, glancing over his shoulder like the trees themselves might be wired. DEA, state boys, Wilkins, and his boys too. They got drones. They got dogs. Y'all best start hidin' or runnin'. Mark didn't ask how he knew. Tater might have been a little fried from his own product, but he'd never lied to them before. That was enough. They didn't run right away, though. That wasn't the Appalachian way. No, first they cleaned up the secondary still, buried some barrels, and prepped a contingency plan they'd hoped never to use. And now, in the pale morning light, it was game time. Smoke in the holler. The final batch of the season was a legendary recipe. A small batch apple rye with notes of cinnamon and honey. The still steamed like an old freight train, vapor drifting through the holler, blending into the low-hanging fog pudic, ain't it? Digger said, watching the wisps curl. Pudic gets you arrested, Mark answered. Let's get it bottled. They moved quickly, bottling half the batch while the other half cooled. Just then, the sound that every moonshiner dreads cracked through the morning silence. A low, chopping whir. Helicopter. They froze. Digger's eyes locked with Mark's. That ain't no joyrider. The chase begins. The whir of blades drew closer. From the ridge behind them came another sound, ATVs. Multiple engines. Mark shoved a box of jars into a duffel bag and kicked dirt over the firebox under the still. Digger grabbed the false panel on a nearby tree stump, revealing a hidden tunnel entrance. "We use it?" Digger asked. "We use it," Mark said, already crawling in. The tunnel was barely wide enough to crawl through, damp and dark, carved by hand years ago when they first scoped out this holler. It was supposed to be insurance. Today, they were cashing it in. Meanwhile, above ground, Deputy Wilkins was grinning like a possum in a henhouse as he approached the still site with a half-dozen officers behind him. "Get ready for the collar, boys," he barked. "We got 'em now." They stormed the site, guns drawn, shouting warnings, expecting to catch Mark and Digger red-handed. But all they found was a dying fire, an empty still, and the lingering scent of fresh shine. Wilkins kicked over a crate and snarled. "Damn it. Where the hell are they?" One of his men pointed out fresh tracks heading toward the creek. "We're close. They're running." "Then we don't stop till we got 'em," Wilkins growled. Downriver and deeper, Mark and Digger emerged half a mile away, covered in mud and pine needles. Mark pulled a GPS tracker from his vest and turned it on. "We got one shot at this," he muttered. The tracker wasn't just for navigation. It triggered a signal relay built into a nearby trail cam that sent a message to someone they trusted, someone waiting with a getaway boat hidden 2 bends down the river. They ran through the underbrush like foxes, every step careful but fast. Behind them, dogs barked in the distance. The law was closing in. An old friend, a new trick as they reached the riverbank. A flat-bottomed John boat waited. Behind the outboard sat Popcorn Jr., an old-school shiner who owed them more than one favor.